Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Night in Paradise. Night in Paradise is a Korean crime thriller that tells the story of Tae-goo, a man who carries out a hit on a boss of a rival gang after coming to the conclusion that he was responsible for carrying out the hits on his own family members, specifically his sister and his niece. Because Tae-goo's boss Yang didn't order the hit, he's eager to cover their tracks or else they'll both end up dead for carrying out that hit in the first place. So he orders Tae-goo to go to Jeju Island and carry out and live on his life in a fake identity for at least 7 days until he's able to escape to Vladivostok in Russia and await further instructions. Once Tae-goo gets to Jeju Island, he meets his chauffeur Jae-yeon, who we find out later in the movie is terminally ill, and she acts as his chauffeur basically to look after him while he's here until he's able to get to Vladivostok safely. But as you can imagine with this kind of movie, the mafia is quick to catch up to Tae-goo's steps as they find out that he's living in Jeju, and from there the rest of the movie carries out as a sort of cat and mouse scenario as Tae-goo tries to escape to safety along with Jae-yeon. And I know I've said this in videos in the past where I've reviewed movies that come from different countries, but I apologize in advance if I'm not saying any of these Korean names right at all. I am awful when it comes to foreign pronunciation. Aside from the opening scene in the movie when Tae-goo kills the chairman of the rival gang, there's not much in the way of action. The first act of the movie is more character development and setting the pace of the story, and then the second act is where things really start to ramp up in terms of action and overall intensity. I like Tae-goo's overall character and personality in this movie. He's a young, impressionable man who's very kind and friendly toward people who interact with him that just got his head way over in a scenario that he had no business involving himself in. And as the movie progresses in its story, we start to see more details being revealed about Tae-goo's past life, both as a mobster and as a family man in the interactions that he has with Jae-yeon throughout the story. And I just love how much depth that his actor added to the character. I thought that Tae-goo was very well done overall. Jae-yeon, on the other hand, is a lot different from Tae-goo. She's not technically a bad character, but I found that she was lacking a bit of depth in certain areas, specifically with regards to the fact that she has a terminal illness. There's only like 1 or 2 moments in the story where her terminal illness really affects her, and then throughout the rest of the movie she's just talking about it and being gloomy and depressed about it. And the movie doesn't really explain what the illness is supposed to be to begin with. There isn't anything in the way of symptoms that she has that the audience can use to identify it. She does use medication here and there, but that's pretty standard for your average case of Mystery Disease X. What she lacks in depth, however, she totally makes up for it in terms of personality. Unlike Tae-goo, who's a lot more soft-spoken in comparison, Jae-yeon has no problem getting in people's faces, even if those people happen to be mobsters. And I just want to say right now that you do not want to mess with her when she has a gun in her hand. There's a few moments in the story where she's wielding a pistol and she just goes to town on anyone that's in her way. I love it when she just lets all hell break loose. These two characters complement each other extremely well. Tae-goo is more thoughtful and quiet, whereas Jae-yeon is more brash and reckless by comparison. Despite their initial differences, however, they actually have a lot more in common than one might think in the fact that they're basically both dead people walking, with Tae-goo having a hit set out by the mob that are out to get him, and Jae-yeon having a terminal illness that leaves her with limited time to live. And I love that the movie has a lot of scenes of dialogue between the two where they're just sitting at a dinner table eating seafood together, or they might be on a park bench having a deep, meaningful conversation. I love that there are a lot of moments in this movie story where it just took time to have them chill out and get used to each other as characters, because it helps us understand them better from an audience's perspective as well. Personally, I felt that the villains were all over the place just because it seemed like the movie kept going back and forth as to who the main villain was, but from my perspective, it was Chief Ma. Ma is one of the lead counselors of the rival gang whose boss Tae-goo had killed, but as it turns out, we find out later on in the movie that the boss isn't actually dead. He's barely hanging on for dear life, and it's Ma's responsibility to catch Tae-goo and bring him to justice. Ma is one bad dude when it comes to being a villain. He is not afraid to get his hands dirty in order to get what he wants, especially when he's interrogating people to find where Tae-goo is, and all of his dirty deeds that he does when he interrogates people range from simple blackmail to straight up cutting off somebody's ear. And I don't know if this is a spoiler for me saying this, but Ma ends up being a villain in the story about halfway through as well, just by virtue of being forced to work alongside with Ma. I think Ma and Yang work well enough together as villains, for the most part. Ma is a lot more straight to the point and intimidating as hell in certain scenes, whereas Yang is a complete coward in every sense of the word, and he takes every chance he can get to hide from whatever's happening on screen. I just don't think their relationship was quite as memorable compared to tae-goo and Jaeon, and that's just simply due to the fact that they're the main characters of the story and we're supposed to be more invested in them to begin with. I found there to be a surprising amount of action in this movie. I wasn't expecting it going into this because I like to watch Netflix originals without having seen the trailer beforehand, but I was really surprised at how many gunfights and fistfights there were in the movie. There was even a car chase thrown in for good measure, which I really enjoyed. This movie is also filled to the brim with blood and gore. There are many action scenes in this movie that end in a huge body count, and even tae-goo finds himself being drenched head to toe in blood in a few scenes as well. So if you're not a fan of those crazy kinds of violence, you may want to stay away from this movie. Personally, I don't mind seeing extreme amounts of violence on screen. I've seen action movies my whole life, so I'm pretty much used to it at this point. But even from my perspective, I thought that some of the scenes in this movie were a little bit overboard, just a little bit. I can remember one scene in the movie where these two characters are shooting at each other from behind walls, and their bullets are going through the walls hitting each other, but they never drop on the ground dead. They stay standing up firing at each other for like 10 seconds until they eventually both drop dead, and the whole time I was wondering like, okay, is this going to end or what? There's a few action scenes like this sprinkled throughout the movie where characters just endure extreme amounts of physical punishment, yet they keep on taking hits. And for a movie that's supposed to be a realistic crime drama, I found the action to be a bit much in this regard. In between all the bits of extreme violence in this movie, there's also a lot of quiet scenes spread throughout as well. I already talked about the interactions between tae-goo and Jaeon and how they develop their relationship with each other over time, but there's so much more than that. There's a lot of aerial shots and wide shots showing the rural scenery of Jeju Island, and it really gives off a lonely vibe of isolation, which makes sense considering the fact that tae-goo is supposed to be isolating and hiding from the mob. There's a lot of great scenery that's featured throughout this movie. I just love how beautiful the overall environment was. The only problem I have with it regarding its presentation is that there seems to be a blue color tone that's present in pretty near every scene of the movie. And I kind of understand why that tone is there to begin with. It's supposed to give off a cold, lonely vibe that adds to the atmosphere of Jeju Island, but I just felt that it was really overdone in this movie. We didn't need to see 90% of this movie with a blue hue on it. Overall, Night in Paradise is a solid crime thriller. While it has trouble balancing the tonal shifts between the action and the drama and the extremes in both cases, I still thought that it was very fun to watch. If you enjoy watching crime thrillers, particularly foreign ones, you want to see a relationship change over the course of a story, and you don't mind seeing extreme amounts of violence, this movie would definitely be right up your alley. I just remembered, I don't know why it took me this long in the review to say this, regarding the extreme bits of violence, the ending is amazing. It is a total, complete bloodbath that is a culmination of all the tension and events that were building up over the course of the story. I loved this ending scene. It was what made the movie work for me. While the movie is a bit on the long side and it's really ham-fisted and confusing at times with its story presentation, I still thoroughly enjoyed my time watching this movie. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Night in Paradise. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Chinese action film New Gods, Ne Zha Reborn. Bye bye.